So this week, like I said, we are in the book of Deuteronomy. Finally. This is the fifth book of the 5 books of Moses, so we're running out of books. That also means that the high holidays are very, 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 very close. But I try to stay calm. I try to remain centered. This week's Torah portion is about Elchanan. And we find Moses. Moses is there and he's talking to the whole assembly of Israel. Actually, the whole book of Deuteronomy is Moses' last talk to the whole people as they are about to enter into the promised land. And through that last talk, he retells the whole story of the Exodus. 40 years worth of what happened. What happened, what we learned, what we got, and who we have become in order for us to enter into that promised land. And as you open the page, Moses is recalling, retelling the story of the time when he implored. Va'elchanan, the word is so beautiful. The English can barely do it, but implore, I think, is the closest you can get. He implores God to lift up, to delete the death sentence that God punished him with. And to let him live and let him cross the Jordan River so he too could walk into the promised land. See, what happened was that many years before, poor Moses just let this uncontrollable anger take him over. And he violently hit a rock with his staff to bring forth water to the yet again complaining, yet again rebelling Israelite people. He lost consciousness. He lost it and let his emotion take him over. Against, in direct violation, in fact, of God's direct orders that were that he had to talk calmly to the rock and ask the rock politely to yield its water. God wanted the miracle to be a true miracle because it included compassion. It included asking the rock to do it. And because of that, God came back to Moses and said, because of what you have done, you will not live to cross the Jordan River and enter into the promised land. You too will perish with that generation. And you can hear, even as Moses is retelling the story, you can still hear that he's unsettled. He's still unsettled by the whole thing. You know, he's very emotional. You can feel through the words of the Torah. And you can put yourself in his shoes, in his sandals, really. You can feel yourself in that place of that overwhelming feeling of injustice. That overwhelming feeling of resentment, perhaps. That overwhelming feeling of disappointment. And that's what I love about the heroes in Torah. Because all of them are just like us. Human. Beautifully human. None of them is ever depicted as that perfect being. Each and every one of them flawed. Each and every one of them overcome by human emotions. Each and every one of them expressing their human limitations. And that's why we can relate. We can relate to their stories. We can connect to who they are because they are reflecting back at us aspects of ourselves. Because we too live lives that often are faced with In fact, I simply just have to turn on the news to time and time again be gifted the gift of feeling painful disappointment over and over again. You turn on the news and the list is really too long. But just a few days ago we heard about the House of our so-called representatives in Washington, D.C., who voted to cancel, to delete, to remove, to cut funding to food stamps. At a time in our history where those food stamps are in most dire need. They sent people who voted to bail out for billions of dollars the wealthy banks and financial commercial units that caused this collapse in the economy that threw millions of our fellow citizens into poverty, into homelessness, into hunger. And then, of course, just last week, the unfathomable, really, verdict in the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman's trial. I mean, we are still, and through this week, we have witnessed our nation reeling with emotions. And all of us, at least many of us, have gone through, I suspect, a range of different emotions day after day as this past week unfolded. You know, we thought that our political system was sick. We maybe thought that our economy was also very sick. But we had hope about our judicial system, right? The word disappointment actually doesn't really capture those waves of emotions that some of us felt through this past week. And I believe that if we still believe in a God out there to which to pray, to ask for what we want, just like Moses did in our Torah portion, we would also we would also implore God to do something and maybe change that verdict from this jury. But that God does not exist. You know, the divine that we have come to realize is that which manifests as all of us in all of it. Is not the cosmic concierge that our rational minds have absolutely rejected. No, the divine, like I said, is that energy, that presence, which awakens through everything, as everyone. It awakens as Trayvon Martin. And it also awakens as George Zimmerman. And it also awakens as each and every one of those people in the jury. See, when we read Torah here at BenHaim, we do a little trick. We open the text and we start with the assumption that as we read the stories and the heroes and the events in Torah, we start with the assumption that we are all the characters. And all of them are mirrors to our own self. All of them hold a piece of who we are. And that trick actually is not to be limited to the words of this ancient text. Because I believe that this world and the unfolding of the narrative of this planet is Torah itself. And that all the characters in that story, in that meta-narrative, are all as well expressions of who we are. We are Trayvon Martin, and Trayvon Martin is part of us. We are George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman is part of all of us. Just as we are, and as the members of that jury are part of us. We can't push them away. See, the reason why we find ourselves to be so upset and so distraught and disappointed is because in a lot of ways we feel ourselves and want to feel ourselves separate. We want actually to put distances between us and that George Zimmerman. We want to put distance between us and the jury in Florida. Because we know we are right and we know they are wrong. And it is helpful to us to condemn them and point a finger because that's what we do with the George Zimmerman within ourselves. We condemn him, we point a finger at him, and we try to do the best to jail him. And we want them to do the same. And how come they didn't? Now, perhaps it is justice, perhaps it is injustice. The point I'm trying to make is that it has little to do with what is happening on the outside. It has everything to do with what is happening within us. And we get trapped into those black and white, extreme absolutes. I am right and they are wrong, and therefore I have the right to be upset and angry and disappointed. Disappointed in my government, disappointed in the economy, disappointed in the justice system, disappointed. But is that posture really helpful? I was at a breakfast this week, and the person that came to present at this breakfast is a person who works in the nonprofit world and works in the interfaith world. And as part of his presentation, he handed out a poem. And the poem was from this Israeli poet, Yehuda Amichai. It was a beautiful poem that speaks to that black and white mentality of wanting to be right. And magically, it should have appeared in your prayer booklet this Shabbat. So I'd like you to pull it. I'd like you to take a moment to read it. And as you do, I'd like to, after that, invite you to share what is awakening within you as you read this poem. Just take a couple of minutes to voice whatever is opening up for you. Doubt and love. Those are the two that I circled. I think it's important to doubt. I think doubt is healthy. We have to doubt what the system is feeding us. We have to doubt the system itself. We have to question the status quo. And we have to doubt our own solidified truths. We have always to question those places we are right. When you tell yourself, I know I'm right, start questioning. And loves. It's a beautiful beautiful word to put here because love has to be the impulse to get out of the always right place. Because we love most with those we fight best. Right? But we can quarrel, something like that, from a place of love. Right? Because we love one another. So we need to challenge maybe ourselves and our country because we love our country. It is an act of love. And so yes, perhaps our democracy is sick. Some might even say that it is critically ill. But what we have to remember, and I think what this poem says to me, is that we are the physicians. We are the physicians not only of our country, but we are the physicians of one another. And what we need to remember, if we are willing to stand as the physicians, is our Hippocratic oath. What that means is that we have to take responsibility to break through the manufactured trance that pits us one against the other. That makes those who don't believe the same way we believe the enemy. That wants us to look at our world and our nation in black and white. That you are either my camp or not my camp, and if you're not, there is no dialogue possible. Because that stance that we have been witnessing through our media for so many years is now breaking up our families. People within families don't talk to each other if their views differ. Our communities are breaking apart. No wonder our nation is breaking apart. But this lack of dialogue, this manufactured split, division, is not democracy. Democracy is not, I'm entrenched in my right and I vilify you as being wrong, and vice versa, no matter what side of the fence I am. Democracy is when I am able to hear you and embrace you with love. I can quarrel with you. Amen. But democracy is where pluralism of ideas are welcome. Not when people are so entrenched in their position that they can't hear each other. And for that, we have to recognize that we have a piece of the other inside of us. We are Trayvon Martin. We are George Zimmerman. We are racist. We have that inside of us. And we are loving and inclusive being. We have that inside of us as well. And as long as we are afraid of claiming those aspects of self, we will continue to push back and vilify the other. And we will lose our democracy. Because we will lose that place in the middle. That place in the middle is becoming a gap that is being built by the antagonist parties. And the problem with that is that in that dark place, that dark gap in the middle, is where dictatorship thrives. When there is no more conversation. When I'm no longer willing to acknowledge my part and my shadow. When I'm no longer willing to extend my hand to make peace. To say, I hear you. I was listening to our president. Shira called me and said, our president talked, and you should listen to his short speech online. And he called at the end of that speech to what I think I was talking about. He called us to begin conversations, to start being our democracy again. And democracy happens when neighbors begin to talk, when communities meet, and conversation happens. This is the essence, the core of democracy. When we can cross over from one church to the other, from one race to the other, and share in our stories, and know that all stories are parts of who we are. We need to do it for this generation. But most importantly, we need to do it for the next generation, le dor vador. Because there's a generation that is being raised right now who might not know what true democracy looks like. They will wake up at 18 and all they have known for 18 years is this party barking at that party and no conversation. And we are at risk of them losing democracy, le dor vador, for our generation, but most importantly